Hello, folks. This is Spiro with the Developers Master Senior Expert Gandalf Wizard course. That was stupid. I should have stopped. I apologize. So, basically, what I'm going to do is try and just, as naturally as possible, pick up where I last left off. It's been a couple of weeks. Some crazy stuff's happened in life. So I have not been able to do a video as quickly as I would have liked. But here I am. I'm once again equipped with coffee. And I'm just going to take a sip here. And as you all know, we are working on Machikoro. So, as it turns out, I've done a few projects since the last video. And as a result of those projects, I've actually come through some learnings. So I'm just going to go over them here with you. And again, just for anybody who's might be watching this for the first time, this is like a very long form. Every episode should be about an hour course of walking through, building this thing called Machikoro. It's a board game. Go look it up. So there's going to be a lot of talking, and it's not going to be fast paced, and you're not going to get to those quick hits. If you're a programming junkie, this isn't for you. If you want an inside look at like a real project that's going to actually be seen by people, that will use real work, this is what it's meant. This is what this thing is meant to be. So it should give you a pretty in-depth look. So I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to try and talk through a lot of this stuff. And your feedback is welcome. And also just thanks everybody for the likes and the subscribes and stuff from before. Like, you guys are pretty awesome. I'm trying to let this grow a bit organically. Like, I don't want to go out there and do a whole bunch of shameless self-promotion. I might do that. I haven't really thought about what I want out of this. More than anything, I just want to help people. So, I'm kind of relying on you guys to tell me whether you like what I'm doing by how much you're sharing and subscribing and all of that. So, if you want me to keep at it, just let me know, and I'll do my best. Okay, so one of the big things I found out. So in the last video, we talked about using TypeScript. And what I've come to find out is that TypeScript does not have great support for web components. There's actually an open issue with TypeScript and web components right now that, in my personal opinion, basically makes TypeScript unusable with web components. So I'm actually not overly... I'm not really happy with that. I love TypeScript, but if it's going to block me to the point where I have to jump through a lot of hoops to use it, it's probably not worth it. So I've decided that instead of TypeScript, we'll use Babel and ESLint. Because what ESLint will do is make sure that we're writing at least decent quality JavaScript. It won't make it super awesome, but it should remove some of the stupidity that I'm going to end up writing. And then with Babel, or Babel, however you pronounce that, because we want to target older browsers, we'll get that out of Babel by having it compile to like ES5, for example. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get rid of this note here, and instead of TypeScript, I'm going to say Babel plus ESLint. Another thing I just happened to run across, I think it was on Reddit maybe, but there's this thing called libui nappy, an API, which is the ability for Node to call the native desktop bindings of Mac, Linux, and Windows. So instead of using Qt GUI, I might just stick to Node and Node. Because what I was thinking was you'd have a node binary that would basically house a couch co-op server on your machine, and then you would have a little GUI that you could like start it up and have friends join and whatnot, kind of like a game you download off Steam, and you click an exe file and it's just there. So we'll see, we'll probably fiddle around with that, but I'm not overly concerned about it right now. It's just something that I'll leave here as a note. And then unit testing, because we're not using TypeScript, I feel like unit testing is actually more important than it was before. Because, say, for example, we want to be testing our types, because JavaScript doesn't have static typing. Unit testing might help us capture some errors that TypeScript might have otherwise caught for us. So I'm going to add something like Mocha, Sign-On, Chai. I can't remember exactly which one of these frameworks. There's a combination of frameworks you can use to do your unit testing, both client and server side, and I can't remember what the combo is, but it's something like this. So I'm just going to like make that as a note. We're going to do unit testing. Okay, so more or less, this is doing what this is the notes on everything that I want to do. So I think we can get started in terms of thinking about how this is going to be structured. And I feel like what we're going to end up having is a PHP folder, and then a static folder, which will be all our HTML, client-side HTML, JS, and CSS, and then a node folder down the road for our node-based couch co-op. I think that makes the most sense for now. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to create some folders. PHP, node, and static. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some readmes in here, and it'll be the static HTML, CSS, and JS of the board game. And then here it's going to be very much the same, except it'll be the the PHP backend, and then same with Node. The Node couch co-op. We'll say that for now. Okay. Okay, so then in the static, this is going to be really straightforward. We're going to have some JS files, we're going to have some CSS files, and then we'll have an index. So I'm going to just create like a super bare bones index file. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, so I think what I need to start with is something easy to tackle and where we can see progress so we feel good about what we're doing. So I think what I'm going to do is I have a bare bones web component that I use on other projects, and it will just help to make things go a little bit faster. So I'm just going to see if I can quickly find that here. So I think the idea here is that I'm going to create a simple web component that will be the card for our, like our Machikaro cards, and I'm just trying to find the stupid thing here. I know I'm close. Because that way we can kind of see what it looks like to actually have a web component running. Because I realize that some of you maybe don't know what that might look like. Here it is. Okay. So I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to create a JS file. I'll just quickly close. I'll quit that. No. No. I've quit too much. I love Sublime because it'll basically pick up where I left off. Yeah. Okay, great. So close this guy and close this guy and close this guy and close this guy. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so this is a really bare bones web component, and I'm going to call it card. And essentially what it has is the raw makings of what you want in a web component, plus like a little bit of my own stuff that I find I do more often than not. So what we've got here is a model, and the model is like essentially the layout of the properties of the component, of the web component, of the HTML element. And then we've got properties, which I find are different. So I find in my personal use of it, the model is like the data that powers the element, that the element references, whereas the properties are related to the element itself. So I'll explain more how this works as I use it, but hopefully that gives you a rough idea. And then what I have is a private elements variable. It's not really private. You can access it publicly. But if this component is going to house a number of other elements underneath it and I want access to them, I just have a place where I can store all of them here. It's helpful to me to be able to access them. And then I've got a template which I can generate any one of at least two ways. There's even a third way I could do it. And then what I have here is a shared style sheet template, which again we'll get to in a minute here. But basically, there are times when I want a shared style sheet or shared JavaScript in my components, and I don't want to call them over and over again. There's a way to do that, so I'll get to that. And as a matter of fact, this is actually named incorrectly. I'm just going to. It's not just for style sheets. Okay, cool. So there it is. And then what I'm going to do is, in order to test it, go card. Okay. I think this looks right. Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Docker, And there is a way to, there's a Docker command for Apache, because all I want is Apache right now. So here, I'll throw this on over here. So there's a way for me to just run, yeah, this is what I want. I just want to run this without a Docker file. I just want to run the index. I want to see where I'm at. I've only done a web component. This shouldn't be that difficult. And so then what I have is a Ubuntu Bash session. It's Windows subsystem on Linux. And I've got an alias for Docker. I'm running Docker for Windows. And then I'm actually logging into not a virtual machine version of Ubuntu. It's running side by side. And I can do everything I want on an Ubuntu machine while my Windows is running. And then I just made Docker point to my Docker for Windows install. So what I need to do is go to my Machikoro folder. And I just want to use the current. Nope, that's not what I want. I want to run static. So go to static. Now I should be able to run this. And once it's running, I should be able to go to 80. There we go. There we go. Okay, so one of the things that I can do with web components is tell it to put in some custom content when it's attached to the DOM. So now if I refresh that, that didn't work. I wonder why. It might be because my template is oh, I see. I'm not even initialized. Duh. Right. I've purposefully separated my initialization. Nope. Even that didn't do it. It's funny. Okay. So when I'm connected, what happens? Blah, blah, blah. I don't really care so much about that. This is fine. That's fine. And my template will be... No, it's still not working. I'm just going to do a simple test here. Oh, yes, I'm a big idiot. So this is exactly why even though this was stupid and a waste of time, I didn't include my stupid JS file. These are the types of issues that are like going to be commonplace and you're going to pull your hair out and it's going to be really, really dumb. This was a great example. So there you go. Okay, so right, when you're doing web components, the web components wants you to use dashes in the tag name so that there isn't a clash with regular HTML elements. So that's fine. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go mk card for Machikoro card. So and then there's no clone node, of course, because I'm not actually doing anything. So I'm just going to go like that. And there we go. All right. So that's exactly what I needed. So yeah, so this connected callback is an automatic callback that the browser, well, the DOM essentially executes when my MK card tag is actually injected into the DOM. Then this connected callback is executed, and that's why I'm able to add custom HTML in here. So that's the beginning of our card. I do have somewhere, I'm going to open a new window. And what I have somewhere here, which I'm going to find really quickly, I think I know exactly where it is, have a list of cards. Yes. So if I go open file, and it would be here, and it would be cards not used yet. Okay. So yeah, I've got this thing here. I mean, that's just one, but there's a whole bunch more cards in Machikoro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy one of these cards. And if you haven't seen a Machikoro card, just Google it or go find the board game. And all these cards have a color to indicate the type of card they are. They have a die number, which is an activation requirement. So if you roll a particular number when you roll your die, it can activate the card that meet that criteria. They each have a name, they have a price to purchase, and then there's a description. So, I kind of get the gist of it. I'm not really overly concerned about the look and feel right now. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pretty much fake this. Well, I mean, not fake it, but what I'll do is I'll create a template, get template function, and I'm going to wrap it in a card class. I'm not actually sure if I even need to do this because it's already wrapped. As a matter of fact, I don't need to do it. I know that for sure right now. So what I do need to do is give it a die. We'll just fake it. I'm going to give it a type. We'll go, yeah, sure, staple food. And then name, which will be general store. And then a price, which will be 0 because those are usually free. And then description. Now what I'm going to do is copy it. Okay, so what'll happen is I will actually use this. So what I do is I create, yeah, I'm not entirely sure I actually need to create a template element, but I had this here for one reason or another. We might come across the reason later. Essentially what this does is it creates an element that's not exactly in the DOM. It's kind of a self-sustained element. It's called a DOM shadow. So it won't cause like a repaint or a reflow on the browser, which is handy. We don't want to be doing a bunch of repaints if we don't have to. I can't remember why I particularly have it in here. It feels kind of redundant, considering I'm using a web component, which is also its own DOM shadow of sorts. So I might get rid of this. But what I will do is I call the get template function that I just created, and it'll return this HTML and apply it to the template. And then I'll enable this, which clones the template and injects it into the web component. And then I'll remove that because it's not necessary. So then if I refresh, there we go. Okay, so we've got ourselves a card. It doesn't look pretty, but what we can do is add Tailwind really quickly. I really, really, really prefer having having packages stored locally as opposed to calling them through CDNs, particularly for freezing the versions. I've had version upgrades break my websites, and there are definitely ways around that. Don't get me wrong, this isn't like the most foolproof way to do it. It's just, especially for development, I know exactly which version I'm dealing with. I just never have to worry about it. And then as I move into production, then I start worrying about, okay, so how do I properly CDN this and make it more performant and so on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can download Tailwind, which is what we've agreed to use. So yes. And when this is over, let's see if we can just get a distributable version. It's pre-flight. Yeah, okay. And I just want to make sure that I use this correctly. I've done this 100 times and I still need to look it up because I don't remember all the intricacies. Well, that's the other thing I could have done. I could have just borrowed it from here. As a matter of fact, this has a minified version. And yeah, I think I'm just going to do that. Yeah. I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to get the minified version. I'm going to call it. So I'll close that. So I'll copy it and oops, wrong one. Tailwind. Min. Okay. So that's fine. I just want to see if I can get a version. 0.7.3. So now add it. I'm just going to go here. Just so it's a reminder that that's what I'm using. I'll make it better after. But hopefully that means, yep, it seems to have kicked in already. And I can see it in here. Excellent. Okay. So the idea behind Tailwind, just to give you a brief overview, is that it's atomic. So you have things like, well, essentially you run everything through classes. Instead of creating style sheets for, you know, every little thing, you're calling classes which are atomic level styles. And then the idea is that you can run a preprocessor that will go through and determine what styles you're actually using and give you a slimmed down version of Tailwind that's just what you need and only what you need. You can even get it down to a component level where if you have a component that only has certain types of classes and therefore a certain type of CSS, it will compile that CSS for that component for you, and then you can include it dynamically at an atomic level. It's really great for stuff like that. For now, we're just going to include the whole thing, and we'll sort out how to make it slimmer afterwards. This just gives me the full profile, and I can start fiddling around with it. So, for example, I keep doing that. I'm going to get rid of this. I don't need it anymore. So, for example, if I get rid of this, what I can do, even on this card, is go padding 2, I think, and it should just pad the whole thing. I can't remember if it's yeah, padding. Yeah, there we go. So it's added padding to the whole thing. I could go and, like, you know, you can add padding to it. And then you can do things like, I don't know, border. So there's a border here. And so so now here's what we're running into. We're running into a problem. So you can see I'm applying these styles and I'm pretending like I'm going, to me, this seems normal, but to you, you're like, hey, these styles aren't applying. What the heck? So this is what happens with web components. They are basically self-contained. You can open them up, but that opens up a series of other issues that you probably don't want to tackle. At least you want to be very picky when you open up the web component to the world. I'm just going to take a sip of coffee here. So what we're going to do is we are not going to open up the web component, but what we will do is share the Tailwind style sheet with the web component. And this is where the shared template thing came in from before. So what I'll do is I'll go template ID X shared, and then we're gonna copy this here. So what that does is it calls the Tailwind CSS in this web component, because what we're doing is we're pulling it and taking the content and appending it into our HTML. So even though this looks like all that's getting appended, that's no longer true. It's first our shared style sheet that we just made here, and then our HTML, and I can prove it. So right now, here's our shadow root. This is all we have, and that's fine. That's the stuff I created in that get template function. Now if I refresh, if I've done this correctly, which I clearly did not, ID is X shared. Yeah, no, it looks right. So what I'll do is I will... that's still not right, is it? Oh, yeah, right. There's a runtime condition here, I bet. I bet if I move this script down to the bottom, all of a sudden... yeah, okay. That was the key. So it is... loading it. Yeah, okay. So that was the key. So what happens is the web component runs before the DOM is ready, and I had the script tag up at the very top in the head, and so it was not picking up that there was a template X shared in the DOM yet, so it wasn't picking up that there was this Tailwind CSS available in the web component. It's kind of a convoluted thing to say, but essentially you want the JS to run after all your DOM elements. There's another thing you can do. You can go, you can add a window add event listener, which is probably what we're going to end up doing. And it's going to say on DOM load, then execute a bunch of stuff. That's probably what's going to end up happening here. But for now, this was the answer. We'll leave it like this for now. We'll put our JS at the bottom. But there is another way to handle this that might be better down the line. We'll get there. Okay, so we have Tailwind now shared. What's nice about this method is it makes Tailwind available inside the component, even though it's enclosed from the rest of the DOM. And it won't load it twice. Like if you look, there's only one call to Tailwind in the network tab. That's because it's already loaded. So it doesn't need to load it again. And that just makes it available everywhere. So now the other thing that's getting to me is why on earth the content is not, or rather the styles are not working correctly. We have padding, we have a border, we have some content. So it might be because there's no... yeah, that's what it was. It's not displaying block by default. We should need to do that. There's probably some CSS that I need to include some general CSS. Yeah, if I add the block, it works now. Yeah, okay. So I have to make sure that I use good CSS, which we'll get to shortly-ish. Another thing that I want to do is I want to kind of use the style conventions that Tailwind asks for. So I'm just going to wrap this in a container just so we can kind of follow what it's asking us to do. And I also want the container to be centered. Yeah. So what MX Auto does is it puts an automatic margin on the left and right of the container so that it's centered on the screen, which is kind of nice. It handles that for us. It also works pretty well on mobile. We do need to include a meta tag, and I can't remember exactly what it was. So what I like to do is go to the HTML5 boilerplate, which is a great resource. If you ever just want like HTML just ready to go, this is a really great resource for it. As a matter of fact, we might end up using this here, but for now, I just want to get something up like quick because I feel like we've spent so much time doing stuff, doing really stupid stuff that I shouldn't have had a problem doing. So now if I turn on mobile, that's what we wanted. So the viewport meta tag, it actually helps us to maintain our viewport and our width and height and our scaling too when we're on mobile devices, or at least on lower resolutions. And so you'll notice that without it, if you go back to what I did before, everything was really, really small. That's because it shrunk and scaled everything down with the screen size. But with that meta tag, it doesn't do that. So, I mean, we have like a really stupid card. It's basic. We're using Tailwind. We're using a web component. It wasn't that terrible. I did spend more time than I would have liked to on it, but I'm trying to do everything out of memory and, kind of fail and learn with you and talk through the process with you so that you can see what it might be like to go through a process like this. But so far, so good. It's a start. So then comes the next part that I'm thinking of, which is trying to determine what our REST API will look like. And how we're going to handle the cards, the tabletop. Like we have to represent a tabletop somehow. There's a lot of stuff that opens up now that we have this set up here. So it's a matter of trying to pick something that's worth trying out here. So we have some cards. We're going to need players. I would say the max. My first gut feel was to add functionality that says, hey, do 2 to 4 players, but that actually makes things a bit more difficult because you have to account for a dynamic level of players. I think what I'm going to do is just say 2 players and only ever 2 players. And then that way we only have to worry about 2 players. And then if we add a 3rd player, it's an additional item that we can tackle with at the time. So we'll make it 2 player, which means we need like the UI for that. We need a REST API for doing stuff. What is it? Yeah, I'm thinking of some things. We're also going to need a way to get all the cards. And I kind of have a suspicion that our cards should be loaded into the initial page load on the client side. The only problem with that, I'm thinking, is let's say that we have version 1 of the game, which has 20 cards, and then we decide, hey, there's a really cool card we want to add. It's card number 21. And so then it's version 1.1 of the game. So you'd want to be able to call the version of your game through the REST API so you can get the setup for that version, something along those lines. Okay. So I think I know what we need to do next. We need to focus on the PHP aspect. So we need to document out our REST API. This is boring, nitty-gritty stuff, I know, but this is real life. This is how it works. So API. So I'm just going to kind of like pseudo code without any real structure here. So we probably want something that's game, so that you can request the status of a game. Okay, and then we want an action, which means that you want to, like when you roll some die or when you purchase a game, or sorry, a card, you want to run it against this action API call, and then the call will tell you if that's an appropriate action to take. That way you can't just run any action you want on your own. The server has to verify that your action is correct based on the game. So we'll probably want to be passing it a game ID and then an action. Maybe it's a string, maybe it's an ID, whatever. This we would be like get status of, create new, join a game. Yeah, okay. So I mean, what actually happens in the game? You start off, somebody creates a game, and then they pass a key or an invitation of some kind. Another person joins. Everybody gets their default setup, and then actions are things like you buy a card, you roll your die, you use a card, which makes other things happen, and then at the end of your action or your actions, which might be a turn based. Yeah, so that's what it would be. The action would be end your turn. So you do a bunch of actions and then you'd say end turn. Then what we would have is anybody who's waiting for you to take your turn would just continuously pull the game API call to get the current status of the game. And if the current status of the game is someone finished their action and it's someone else's turn or it's your turn, that's what you'll get back. And then your client will just handle that. So if I'm player A and I'm waiting for player B, I'm constantly checking /game. And then at some point, player B ends their turn and /game tells me player B ended their turn. It is now your turn. And then my client sets me up for my turn. Okay, I think that's good. So that's actually pretty straightforward. That's a decent start, and it's not complicated. Yeah, okay, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so in order to accomplish this, what we can do is create an index file in PHP. Nope, wrong place. And it'll just be this. We'll just leave it like that. Okay, so what we're going to have is a class called game. I'm going to write this down. And it's going to need to grab JSON of game based on an ID. Because if you remember, all our games are going to be stored in a JSON file, like a regular JSON file, because our hosting limits us from being able to do a bunch of queries or executions against PHP. So It's just an easier way to handle it. And so in actuality, we're not going to be calling /game. We're going to be calling, at least to get the status of it, we'll actually be calling, we'll actually get status from the JSON file, not from the API. That will dramatically reduce our calls. Okay, great. So it'll grab the JSON of the game based on the ID. Maybe some memory storage of recently active games. We can get to that. And then it will evaluate actions against game to determine if they're good actions. And then update state of game into JSON file after, is it actions are done or turns are done? I want to say turns are done because you could go through a bunch of actions and not end your turn. So after each turn is done, or other key game action. Maybe a game automates an action. I can't remember all the rules of Machikoro yet, so we'll just leave that open for now. Okay, so then our game class is going to want to do things like get JSON. Yeah, let's just call it get JSON. Get JSON for now. It would be based on here, public function. We'll just do that for now. It'll be based on an ID, which, oh man, my typing is horrible. So we're just gonna write will get JSON file, and then we'll have something that handles actions, but I don't think I want a generic action method. I think what I want is a method for each type of action. So it would be like, I'm gonna comment these out, like buy card, use card, pay debt, because you can pay debts. You have to pay debts in Machikoro. Collect money. That one I'm not so sure about, but we'll go through the rules in another video and sort it out. Yeah, I would say that's more or less. Oh yeah, roll die. There's also a re-roll. Depending on the card that you have available, it'll let you re-roll if you roll doubles, I think, or if you activate the card, or both. Roll die, buy card, use card, pay debt, collect money, roll die. What else is there? That's probably good for now. I'm sure we'll sort it out. But I think I like this better than like just having a generic like I wouldn't want action, because then really what I'm doing is I'm just like creating a switch statement or an if else statement. If action is buy card, then do this. I'd rather just have it so that it's, you call the function buy card, and maybe I make them static functions so that the game class is a singleton, so that you're not loading up this game class per game and it's not eating up memory. I mean, the memory usage is probably minuscule, but you know, just trying to be as efficient as possible and forward thinking. Okay, I'm liking this. Okay. So at this point, what we want to be doing is providing a way to make these API calls. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to create an API class as a JS class. And I'll do things like get game, and it'll be a fetch. and I'll fill this out later. So fetch is I'm just gonna quickly code this out. Fetch is basically an Ajax API for modern browsers. I'll just throw an error. And so I'm just going to use it because it's standardized. It's quick and dirty. And catch. So I'm going to call it api.js. Okay, so that's good. So like essentially what this will do is it'll call the /game URL, and then it'll listen for a JSON response. And if it succeeds, then it'll just spit out the JSON in the console log. If it errors out, then it'll throw an error. It's pretty straightforward, but it kind of gives us an idea of what we want to be doing. So that's fine. That's fine. And then the other thing that I think I want to be doing is I want to explicitly call out that we're using a JSON file. So I'm just going to put this in kind of like as a semi-reminder. So essentially what we do is do something like call an id.json file. Haven't fully thought this through, but this is the idea is on the client side with JavaScript. We'll make a fetch request to an actual JSON file, and that's how we get the state of the game. We shouldn't really be calling /game very often, hopefully at all, unless it's to create a game or join it. After that point, we should just constantly be calling this JSON file based on a game ID, and that'll be that. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so that'll just remind me to do it. I'm just gonna also add it so that I don't forget to add it. And then hopefully that means, of course. Of course it's forbidden. Why wouldn't it be forbidden? I'm gonna stop it. And then I'm going to run it again. Oh, I see. Okay, let's see what happens here. Yeah, okay. Whew, I just had to reboot it. Okay, there it is. I'm not seeing any errors. That's good. Why this is 304 not modified, I don't know. I probably have some permission issues or something, but that's okay. All right, so that's that. The other thing I want to be doing is I want to start up an Apache Docker too. No, not Apache. What am I talking about? PHP. Guys, I'm not 100% today. I really do apologize. So, yeah, this is what I want. And this is CLI. What I might want to do is 7. What's the latest that they have here? 7.3 Apache? Yeah, so we could just go 7 Apache or just Apache. Yeah. Okay, well, let's give it a shot. So PHP, and it would be 7 Apache, just to be a little explicit about it. Yep. That looks all good. And then ports. 80, oops, 8081, 80. I'll let it download. So I cleaned out my own Docker registry. I had some of these things already downloaded from before, but again, if you're, like learning from this, this will kind of just give you an idea of the things you can expect using all these different tools and what it'll look like and so on. So that didn't run in the background because I didn't set it to -D is what makes it do that. So, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to 8081 and of course it's forbidden. Oh, var triple dub HTML. Okay, I used the wrong directory. There we go. So var triple dub HTML. That makes a lot of sense. I should have known it. I'm glad that the logs were open and I didn't run it in the background. There we go. Okay, cool. So it spits out hello. That's awesome. In production, if we use my SiteGround hosting, this will actually be hosted on the same port, on the same server, but that's okay. This is fine for now. It was just a quick way to make sure that we're on the right path and we haven't done something significantly stupid. Yeah, okay. So, it looks like we haven't done a great deal. Like, it feels like we didn't really get much accomplished in an hour, but, I talked through a lot of this and I tried to do as much of it as I could from memory. So, have some patience, but hopefully you're learning as you go along, and this helps me to jog my memory as well. It's been about an hour, so I'm gonna stop here. I think what we're gonna do is in the next video we'll set up the 2 API endpoints in PHP, and we'll just test some calls against them, and then we'll set up our first JSON game. So we'll probably have to talk a lot about Machikoro, how it works, the rules, the cards, etc., and figure out what our JSON game state looks like, because we're going to need that file really soon here so that we can start actually making stuff work. But I mean, we have a CSS framework. We know it's working. We've tried a very simple web component. We know it's working. We have an idea of what our API is going to look like, more or less. We know our PHP is working. We know our HTML is generally working. Like, it's not terrible. There's progress. So, yeah, we'll just keep going and plug away at this. And, I've created technical debt here. This is so simple, and there's still things here that I know need to be handled. But I have a plan for them, and we'll handle them one at a time. One of the key things that I feel personally is important about doing side projects is that you try not to get bogged down in the weeds by doing everything absolutely perfect the first time around. Get something out the door and visible and seen. That will often tell you what you need to be working on more than trying to make it perfect. Because sometimes, like, I often find that I'll try and focus on one little thing and making it perfect, and then only to realize later on that I didn't actually need it at all, and I throw it away, and it's like all that time is wasted. So there's a balance that you have to walk on. That was a really stupid way to say it. There's a balance you have to strike. That I think is proper. And so the balance is that you want to be feeling like you're making progress, but at the same time keeping your technical debt as low as possible. And there's a realization that not going to get it perfect. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. And this was kind of boring, and I am sorry for that. But I hope that this is helping you some way, somehow. And as I said at the beginning, help me out. Share it, like it, let people know about it. I'm going to keep doing this. This could easily be, tens of episodes. But we're going to make a board game, guys, and we're going to put it public, and people are going to use it. Okay, thanks, guys. We'll talk again soon.